You know what? Chris and me are writing a book, and we're gonna have to do an audiobook. We have to have a studio and all that. Like Amazon, have you ever uploaded it to Audible? You're sitting there for 8 hours reading a book. We did it in 4 different days, and it's me and Chris, so Chris is gonna have to come down here. All right, Guru Nation. This is gonna be this is by popular demand actually, since I've been doing these biotech stuff. You guys know I'm merging my two passions, which is clinical research with biotech investing, mainly as a tool to allow me to learn the industry better, mainly because it keeps me from getting complacent. I mean, it's very easy to get stuck in, yeah, I'm a site owner, and you don't really understand, like, the overall picture of why we exist as clinical researchers or as sites, especially on the private side where it's industry sponsored. We are very downstream of financing, and we are downstream of study planning, and there's so much. I think that if more site owners, if more study coordinators took a more holistic view of the industry, not only would it help their careers, but maybe they're going to learn a new hobby slash career slash wealth building skill set, and that's investing in biotech companies. So I got into it out of curiosity. I like stocks in general. I like business, but I thought, you know what? And I've looked on YouTube, like, how do you invest in biotechs? And this is the beginner's guide to that. You can go in depth. This is definitely not going to be comprehensive. Every therapeutic area really is different and they have nuances, but I'm going to keep it kind of macro. And then if you subscribe, so if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. I'm a clinical researcher. I've been in clinical research for 20 plus years. I run the research clinics where a lot of these studies get done, at the sites where we enroll the patients and follow the protocols. But we're going to discuss all that as well. But I'm also an investor, and I'm always doing due diligence on companies that I'm interested in, that I'm invested in, whenever they post interim results, PDUFA, citizens petition, whatever it may be, CRLs. I'm here to analyze it and help us as investors, but help us also in our careers if we happen to work in the life sciences space. So if you were here for the 5% returns, you're on the wrong channel, because you can just put your money in the SPY and not have to do work, not have to think. You can go watch something else and be entertained. Certainly much more entertaining channels than this one. But you're here for the breakthroughs. You're here for the 10x. When I'm invested in a biotech, I want at least 3x, but the really once in a decade opportunity that are 10x. You put in $10,000, and if you play it the right way, within 2 years you'll get 100,000. Or you do the math, whatever you start out with. That's what excites me about biotech investing. And if it's just something safe, like you can just invest in Eli Lilly and do very well. And quite frankly, most of us probably should do that. But since I'm already in the life science industry, I'm already in clinical research, even if I lose on an investment, it makes me a better person in the industry itself, because I just learned, probably if I'm doing my due diligence properly and I'm investing properly and I still lost, I'm still a better person at the end of it in my industry, because I just learned a whole lot more about God knows what, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes or epinephrine. Those are my latest investments, Iova and Aquestive Therapeutics, respectively. But most biotech companies are unprofitable. Most people will lose money in biotech. So investing in the SPY or a company like Eli Lilly might be better if you're not willing to put in the work. And it's a lot of work. And those people who invest in a basket of biotechs, I'm sure there's people out there that do well doing that. I would say the majority don't, because these companies have news coming out probably every month. If you want to invest properly, you need to understand the nuances. You need to understand the overall context. What is the FDA doing? What are their latest approvals? What are their latest rejections? How does this pertain to my particular investment? There's no way you can do that properly if you're like a swing trader, meaning you're holding something for 8 to 12 months or longer. I usually invest for a 2-year window. I will get out sooner if I don't like the way that things are going. But generally, when I look into something, I look into it for the long term, and I'm only invested in 2 or 3 biotech companies at one time. And right now, I have exactly that. I have AQST, I have Iova, and I have ATAI. And I've done due diligence on all those companies. I'm going to continue doing that. And then as I get new ones, you'll hear me talk about the new ones. But when I'm getting new ones, I'm usually rolling out of existing positions and rolling into newer positions. So like I'll have 3 core biotech holdings at the most. If I were to stop what I'm doing in my day job of clinical research, I could probably have more, maybe 10 or a dozen. But really, once you get past that, it's just too much work to do. And I hope you're going to see why based on this video. And this video is meant for you to double click on other areas where you might need to learn more about. And quite honestly, you can use your favorite AI in deep research mode to help you on each particular topic I'm going to get into. But in order to win in this space, you can't guess. You need a system, and you need willingness to work and understand your company. And shout out to Biotech Scanner on X. His X profile is underneath if you want to follow him. His pinned tweet was what inspired this, as well as a couple of my things that I do when I invest or do due diligence, as well as some others out there. But Biotech Scanners is really a pretty good framework. So, and by the way, this is not gonna get too much into how to find the right stock, although the next section is kind of about that. We can probably do an hour-long video on how to find the biotech opportunities. What I'm talking about here is when you found a few, like how to decide which one you want to get into, if any. Or once you found the one you think you want to get into, how to really analyze it. So pharma companies and biotech, I know there's like these words seem interchangeable. Biotech is typically smaller, well, always smaller, research-centric, focused generally on large molecule biologics. There's gene therapies, there's vaccines, but there's also like the companies like that do prodrugs or that are on the 505(b)(2) pathways that repurpose or reformulate generic drugs for different indications or different formulations. Aquestive Therapeutics is a good example of that. And they're typically pre-commercial, unless they are oncology, or maybe they have a few drugs already in their pipeline that have been approved. But typically, I like to look at companies under $5 billion market cap. I will go a little bit higher if the therapeutic indication is promising. This is my latest investment, ATAI. It's in the psychedelic space. They have DMT formulations for, they have an inhalable DMT for treatment-resistant depression. They also have a buccal sublingual film for DMT. That is a hot area. There, you're going to pay a premium for it, especially with this latest FDA administration led by Robert F. Kennedy, who's in charge of the Health and Human Services. He has specifically said he's a fan of psychedelics, and mental health is a huge priority for this administration. So you're going to pay a slight premium for that stuff, but the fundamentals, I think, in this analysis will still apply. So basically find the big unmet need. And this is going to maximize the market potential, um, which is the RNPV. And we're going to get into that and how to analyze that. But the FDA drops hints, and there's never been an administration that has dropped more hints. Now, critics are saying that they're not very consistent in their actions based on what they're saying, but they're definitely pushing for rare disease. They're pushing for one and done treatments presently. If you're watching this in the future, maybe there's a new administration, but I think the fundamentals still apply. There's always going to be a priority review. There's always going to be breakthrough designations. We're going to get into that. You also want to assess the pipeline quality. So you do want things like first and only or best in class potential. I like that, especially with this administration. They are really pushing for first and only new mechanism of actions. The industry kind of, because of the whole standard of care paradigm in the United States, it's hard, even if you get something approved, it's hard to do well sales-wise on another Me Too product. This is why I like the first and only or the best in class potentials. There's also similar compounds performing successfully. So if the underlying science is validated by a competitor's success, it reduces your scientific risk. For example, I think Aquestive Therapeutics is a good example of this. They have a better product, in most people's opinion, for allergic reactions than the current compound Neffy, which is an inhalable nasal spray epinephrine for allergic reactions. This is a better one, but it's slightly behind, but it's best in class potential. And there's already a proven roadmap for validated FDA approval, right? And that company, actually ARS Pharma, received a complete response letter and still got approved a year later, which paves the roadmap. It gives you slightly better visibility as far as the roadmap that your particular investment hopefully should take. So you also want to invest in the platform. So not just a drug, but the platform. You want both. You want potential best in class, first and only, a big unmet need, and then you want something that has a platform, not just one drug. And probably in that order, in that exact order that I mentioned. Can you get away with not having a platform? Yes, but it's risky because now you're up for binary events with zero insurance in the background if your best in class potential gets a complete response letter, which is a rejection. What's next? And that has to come into the equation when you are looking at investments to make. A scalable platform can generate multiple drug candidates, which insulates the company from the failure of a single asset. Now, you can risk it all and ignore that last part, but I personally don't feel comfortable unless there is more than one product in the pipeline. Now, de-risking the science and understanding the catalysts. This is pretty important. So every drug goes through 3 phases, and this is where my foundation as a clinical research site owner, I understand this phase as well. I have an entire 5-hour video on my channel, Introduction to Clinical Research. I would suggest everyone watch that, especially if you're a biotech investor, because you have to understand what a drug goes through, and it's typically a 10-year pathway from phase 1 to potential approval. You can get it down to 7 or 8. The best companies like Eli Lilly do it. If you get fast track designation, you can do it quicker. If you're in the oncology space and you get a fast track designation, you can do it faster and you can get to commercial scale quicker and then have to do confirmatory phase 3 studies later. But for the most part, the phases are important. Phase 1 is safety. Phase 2 is efficacy. So to get from the 63% of drugs make it past phase 1 to phase 2. So the majority make it past phase 1. Phase 1 is basically maximum tolerated dose, PK, PD, what the drug does to the body, what the body does to the drug. Phase 2 is where most of the drugs fail, and that's efficacy. And so pay attention to what stage, when you come across your potential investments, what stage are all their assets at, especially their biggest potential asset. Because even if your company has a platform, it's going to have one that's the most potential. And usually that one that's the most potential is whichever one's furthest along the pipeline. But when it comes to total addressable market, maybe it's further behind in the study pipeline. So phase 2 is where dreams go to die for these biotechs. And that's the efficacy phase. Why? 30%, only 30% make it from phase 2 to phase 3. That's the biggest hurdle. That's the biggest risk. That's why companies that don't have anything in phase 3 are going to be cheaper, relatively speaking, to companies that have products in phase 3. So for example, you could look at just regular back of the napkin math. There's ways you can do enterprise value. We're going to get into a little bit of that, but stay tuned for more videos on that later because those deserve their own videos entirely. But analyzing enterprise value versus analyzing market cap, if you just want back of the napkin math, you're going to have generally higher market cap companies in phase 3 as opposed to phase 2 because there's more risk at phase 2. Again, only 30% of drugs make it to phase 3 from phase 2. Now, phase 3 are the pivotal trials. Those are the ones that the FDA is going to make a decision, and 58% of those are successful. So the FDA signal point, the binary play for a lot of these companies is those PDUFA dates, the FDA review. And if you have something that has an expedited status like fast track, breakthrough, priority review, for my investments right now, Iovance has that and the most potential for more of those later on down the road. But my other investment, ATAI, recently received breakthrough designation for treatment-resistant depression. So that's there's priority reviews that could shorten the time frame. You're going to pay a premium if you invest after those are already received versus before. So it's okay if your risk tolerance is a little less risky and you're more risk off. You might want to wait till those designations get obtained. To me, those are not make or break. Those are icing on the cake. But if you are invested before they achieve any of those and they get it, you're basically doing well because you've already paid for the risk prior to that being granted. So you're getting like the risk taken off that you already put in, if that makes sense. The PDUFA date, this is the specific deadline for the final FDA decision. The amateur thing to do, which is gambling, I used to do this, so this is why I'm telling you, not a good idea, is to just look at upcoming PDUFA dates on the FDA calendar and then go gamble with the biotechs coming up, and hopefully you get them right. You can do that, but it's risky because if you don't know what you're looking at, if you don't actually understand the science, and you don't understand the nuances and the potential risks, you can get caught off guard. If it were that easy, everyone would just do that. Look at the catalysts and then do some rudimentary research and try to figure it out, which ones the FDA are going to approve and which ones they won't. And just because the FDA approves something doesn't mean it's going to be successful commercially. I invested in a company. I did exactly this. And if you go on my channel, you'll find KMPH from about 7 years ago before I actually got better as a biotech investor. And by better, I mean just worked harder at it. It's not that I got smarter or anything. I just worked harder at this due diligence. And so I saw, okay, this is in the ADHD space. Let me take a chance on it. I got it right. My gamble paid off. FDA approved it. It spiked. I didn't sell. And then it kind of went back to below PDUFA prices because the sales were not coming through. And then I ended up selling, I think at break even. The company's still around, so it's wouldn't be a total disaster if I still held on to it. But that company's completely changed since then. They've pivoted. They're actually named something else, and that happens a lot with these biotechs. You'll get mergers, you'll get reverse mergers, you'll get acquisitions, you'll get all kinds of crazy stuff with these small cap companies because they're always pivoting. Like everything depends on the results, catalyst, FDA, sales, more in the pipeline, and they're always shifting, and risk is always shifting on and off, which is why I don't think the average person should own more than 3 biotechs at a time unless they're going to be a full-time investor, which is different. Now, there's binary outcomes, which again, having a company with a pipeline and a platform kind of mitigates that risk to some extent. But sometimes you really have no choice and you invested in something with a platform that ultimately the platform gets shelved because the company runs out of cash, and then it becomes a binary play because of cash. They ran out of cash, which is kind of the next section, is finding value and risk adjusted net present value, RNPV. This is something that I want to do an entire video on. So I'm just going to kind of gloss over it. But it's basically estimates the value of the drug asset itself, accounting for its probability of failure. So just some quick back of the napkin math. Let's pretend like a drug is in phase 3 and it has a nominal value of $1 billion if approved, which is basically, let's say that's the peak sales for a year, $1 billion. That could be a company I'm invested in, actually. Aquestive Therapeutics. Their peak sales could be $1 billion if approved. Now, you multiply that by the 58% chance of approval, because remember, 58% make it a phase 3 get approved. So that's 1 billion times 0.58, which is 58%. It's 580 million nominal value and risk-adjusted net present value. So now you can compare that 580 million to the asset value, to the company's true market cost using the enterprise value, which I want to get into in a later video, but just for now, just know that enterprise value is market cap plus total debt minus cash and cash equivalents. So you're going to look at the risk-adjusted net present value and compare that to the company's true market cost. Enterprise value is the true cost to acquire the business, including all debt and cash. Now, for the fair valuation, if your calculated risk-adjusted net present value is significantly higher than the company's enterprise value, the market may be undervaluing the company. So for commercial biotechs, look at the enterprise value over revenue multiple. And a lot of these are not going to have profits, but they're might have revenue, especially if they have sales already started either on that particular asset, like if they got the priority review and they got conditional approval and they're already demonstrating commercially, or maybe they have other assets that are kind of subsidizing the R&D in some extent. So you look at the enterprise value divided by the revenue multiple, and that's how you're going to get like the fair valuation. If you want an even simpler way to value something, you look at, the way I do it, I look at market cap and I look at any competitors. Even if you're first and only and all that stuff I mentioned, you have somebody in your space that you're competing with. either they're further ahead of you or they're behind you as far as the R&D and the commercialization aspect. So in my example with Aquestive Therapeutics, I got in at around a $250 million market cap. Their competitor just got approved. That was ARS. Their market cap after approval was like 1.4 billion. And remember, I had the conviction, and a lot of basically the general sentiment was the better product is Aquestive, but it's riskier because remember, only 58% make it past phase 3. So you got to like discount it somehow. And the other one's already approved. They just have to prove their sales. So to me, it was a no-brainer. $250 million market cap, $1.4 billion market cap that's already approved. What is that gap, right? And even if we get good interim results, that market cap should be going up. The risk is you get bad results, the market cap will go down. That's the way I was looking at it to compare. Now, let's say your product is the one that's ahead. Well, you need to compare it with the ones that are behind maybe. What are their market cap? What is their share price? What's their market cap? What is their pipeline compared to yours? No two companies are alike, but they could be similar, and that's where value can often be mispriced. And so that's kind of how I do it. I'm going to do an entire video on this in the future, but just know that for now. Now, it's all about mitigating risk. This is your money at the end of the day. I can do philosophical videos on biotech investing because a lot of people take their identity from their investments, especially when they are very high convicted on a particular company and they're not able to see reality when it hits them in the face. I speak from personal example because that used to be me, and I try not to have that be me anymore. So the way I mitigate risk, you got to check the cash runway. And because the enemy of all these small biotechs is dilution. That means the company raises more money by issuing more stock and essentially making your particular shares that you already bought less valuable in order to raise money. The benchmark is 18 to 24 months of runway to safely absorb delays and hit the next major milestones. So the formula would be for the cash runway would be cash balance divided by that monthly net burn rate. You should know what those numbers are. The most recent quarterly review, the most recent earnings call. If you don't know where that's at, go on the investors page for your company and look at earnings results and get those balance sheets and look at those numbers. Cash balance divided by monthly net burn rate. Now, if you don't want to do all that work, you can use these AI tools to do that now for you, but I suggest confirming it manually. It's going to make you better at this. You're going to learn more, but these AIs are actually pretty good at doing it. So if you don't want to do all the math yourself, you just take the latest report, PDF file, you upload it to your favorite learn language model, and you ask it to calculate this for you. What's the cash runway? Now, LLMs make mistakes, so maybe use 2 of them. I like Grok and Gemini, but use whichever one you want. Now, there's issues with partnerships. So current partnerships with a big pharma is huge. A partnership validates the science and provides a non-dilutive funding, which drops the net burn rate and extends the runway, thus protecting shareholder value. So if your company, the best thing is your company doesn't yet have a partnership with a big pharma, but you see the potential for it. And you see this a lot in oncology with combination therapies. There's a lot of combo therapies in immunotherapies in oncology, but there's also natural, and this is where it helps to know the industry. The more you do it, or if you work in this industry, you're going to know it better. What is a natural synergy? Like in the case of Iovance, which is an oncology one, there is a natural synergy for Merck or AstraZeneca to potentially partner with Iova. So far, no partnership has been announced, but it would make sense. And that's where, if you work in life sciences and you study the life sciences space, you can kind of get a sense of potential partners. You're not always going to get that early on. Like in my investment with Aquestive Therapeutics, I've been waiting 2 years. There's a bunch of rumors, but ultimately it's just, a partnership's going to come. But for that particular company, it's going to depend on the PDUFA. And there is a low risk option. So if you're looking for lower volatility, look for companies that are already generating revenue and show stable earnings. But these are going to be the large cap biopharmas with diversified products. And that, like I said in the beginning, invest in Eli Lilly or something like that. Now, intellectual property is the ultimate asset. And you must confirm the patents and the freedom to operate analysis. If a company cannot legally sell the drug upon approval due to an IP conflict, and sometimes those IP conflicts come out of nowhere after you've already invested. So this is another thing to look into. I'm currently dealing with it on one of my companies, AQST. They got a lawsuit, an IP conflict where they can't sell their approved drug for epilepsy, Libervant, due to pre-existing IP dispute, which I was not aware of because it was not actually a headline or anything when I invested. So these things can come out of nowhere. Maybe ask your Gemini to do some due diligence for this kind of, by the way, for the biotech due diligence. I think Google Gemini Deep Research is the best, in my opinion, and Grok is pretty good too. Those are the two that I've been using. They have to be the deep research, and you prompt it, and you essentially can prompt it, hey, do a freedom to operate analysis as if you are an intellectual property analyst for my company's assets, and I want you to defend and show me any potential risks that I may not be aware of. Boom, it's going to go to work for like 10 minutes. You can almost have the power of a real analyst firm in your own phone, in your own computer with these AIs. So I just wanted to make a side note there, but there are always risks that you may not even be aware of in regards to intellectual property. And then exit strategy. Listen, don't fall in love with these companies. Don't make it part of your, and it's doubly harder for me because I'm a public figure. I'm a somewhat public figure with this stuff, being a micro influencer of these 2 or 3 or 4 companies that I actually provide analysis on my YouTube channel. It's very easy to have your own, what's the word I'm looking for, identity tied to these companies. And don't do that. Most people are not YouTubers. They don't have to worry about it. You can just cut your losses. Nobody needs to know. But there's all these forums now. There's StockTwits. There's X. There's Discord. There's Reddit, where people are sharing information daily about these biotechs. I'm on a lot of them. I'm on X and StockTwits. And so you don't have to actually be like an influencer to still have your identity tied into these things. And you got to always think about the exit, either buyout or partnership potential. Very few go the whole route on their own, like a Vertex Pharma, and go from like phase 1 to commercial success and become the commercial juggernaut, and then sell or partner later. Like that's just not even 1%. That's like 1% of 1%, anecdotally, that end up doing that. Especially in this new era that we're in of biotech going forward, in 2025 and beyond. where big pharma has a patent cliff. They are looking, there's not enough buyouts or partnerships out there. What the big pharma want though are the de-risked assets. So the further along you get down the pipeline, the more compelling and the more synergies they have with their portfolios and their existing infrastructure, sales teams. And you can always try to read the tea leaves. Who did your company just hire? Who is this potential? Like, who is Merck? Merck has what in their portfolio? AstraZeneca has what in their portfolio? What would intrigue them to my particular company? And this is where if you can afford to go to some of these conferences like ASCO, like JP Morgan conference. I know sometimes you have to work in the industry to actually go, but if you're already working in life sciences or in clinical research, like I am, and like I know a lot of you are that are watching, you have an extra advantage. And you can start talking to people, even when you go to your investigator meetings, if you're a clinical research coordinator or a PI, talk to the companies there. Like, hey, what do you, I know it's not your area of expertise, but what are you guys looking at as far as acquisitions? You'd be amazed at what kind of insights you'll get. And then otherwise just study the market, read the publications, go on X, use these AI tools, these learn language models. Don't get too caught up in your identity with these companies. Don't fall in love with these companies. At the end of the day, it's your money. And no one else can or should judge you for what you're going to do. It's funny how on these boards like X or StockTwits, when you invest in a company like I did with Aquestive at $250 million market cap, and it gets to $600 million market cap and $700 million. And at one point it hit 900 million and now it came back. Presently it's like at 600. Hopefully we get approved. It goes to 1.2, 1.4 billion. But there's nothing wrong with selling some of your shares as the company doubles in price, triples in price. I mean, you have to be pretty foolish and pretty arrogant, in my opinion. Like 58%, that's still like about half that make it past phase 3 don't get approved. And even if they do, you have to prove that you can sell. So, and then delays can happen. Cash runways don't last forever. Dilution happens when delays happen. If you've made money, there's nothing wrong with taking some profits off. I still have conviction in Aquestive. I'm going to hold a certain amount of shares through PDUFA, but whether that's 30% of my original holdings, 25, 50, that's a very personal decision. Not everyone is a 44-year-old male with a 9-month-old child that has 8 businesses and 2 other companies and cryptocurrency and real estate and different bills. Like, everyone's financial situation is individualized and unique. So don't take advice from people. Oh yeah, hold it, YOLO. Like, that's, in my opinion, you got to have an exit strategy. And you can change your exit strategy based on real life events and what's going on. So obviously acquisitions by larger drug companies are common. It's going to be increasingly common. We're going to be in an era of mergers and acquisitions. Maybe that's going to happen earlier and earlier, depending on how desperate these big pharma get in the pipelines. So psychology is a big part of this. Discipline over emotion. This part's hard for me. I'm a very emotional person. Protect your capital. Know your risk tolerance. Never go all in. In the case of Aquestive, I did go all in the beginning, and I took like half of it off already before PDUFA. But I had a pretty high risk tolerance. I still do. But there's never any sense to go all in and YOLO it all. Even if you have extremely high conviction, even if everything I discussed checks the boxes, you never know with the FDA administration what's going to happen. You never know with a citizen's petition what might happen, what might delay. You never know with an intellectual property lawsuit. It could be some frivolous lawsuit that delays the company. and cost them money. Like, you got to have goals for yourself. Be patient. Don't panic. This is very volatile industry. The stock price will see setbacks. 10% in a day is nothing. Right now, it's November. Hi, for those watching in the future. It's November 13th, 2025. The last month has been insanely volatile, not just biotech, the entire market. Our president's been changing things up, to say the least. Our FDA has been very unpredictable. The global economy itself, very unpredictable. AI, labor market, all this stuff, very unpredictable. So don't panic. As long as the fundamentals are there, you might want to keep doubling down. I never thought I would own so much Aquestive Therapeutics, but the markets kept pushing this thing down. To me, the fundamentals didn't change. And when there was still a $250 million market cap, $300 million market cap, whereas their competitor, who was admittedly further ahead, but I don't think they deserve the $1.4 billion market cap, and this one deserves a 300. So either they were overvalued or this one's way undervalued. And I thought the latter, and I kept buying more shares. And then I was right. And I took some of those risk off, and I still hold a good amount. So don't panic. Don't necessarily be afraid to get more. Things like leverage, be very careful. Only if you have other assets. If I didn't have a good cryptocurrency holdings in my account, I probably wouldn't use leverage as much as I do. And even then, I only use a little bit of leverage, and I try to pay it off as soon as I can. And set goals for yourself before the catalyst happens. And never pick random arbitrary numbers. Like, never say around 10, I'm going to sell. Everyone's thinking that, by the way. Right? So have ranges between 7 to 10. I'm looking for my opportunities. Or if it drops between 1 to 3, I'm definitely going all in. Like, this is where conviction comes in. And you don't get conviction without doing your homework and doing due diligence and listening to every earnings call and reading everything about the company and reading between the lines. Biotech Scanner does this very well on X. I'm trying to be that good for the few that I own. But there's always an expert on your stock. And so learn from them. And then if you hold for bigger gains, remember, you're also taking risks of downside movements. And I don't use stop losses or anything like that. For maximum risk mitigation, diversify. And investing in a basket of companies like ETFs, XBI is very cheap. Some people should just do that. I don't do that. I have too much fun analyzing these things for you guys and for myself. And I think I have a slight advantage when it comes to being in clinical research for a long amount of time. I think I can understand the timelines, the phases, and I'm starting to get better at analyzing the study results as well, where I'm not so good at as on the commercialization side, on the payer side, but I'm getting better at that. So you can do the biotech ETFs. For me personally, I like to have fun while I'm doing this too. Although I'm not doing this primarily for dopamine hits. You'll get plenty of dopamine hits if that's what you're after, but that doesn't equate to making money. Matter of fact, that usually equates to losing money. So that's the part where I need to work on, is the discipline over the emotion, which for me, I'm very selective about what I get into. Like ATAI, I got into it a few weeks ago, but I've been following it for 6 months prior. And so I've been watching it. I saw I got mad when they got breakthrough designation and I wasn't in. And now it's come down since then. So the hype from that high came down because they are going to be starting phase 3. And so they are still in their riskiest part. They're still not done with the phase 2 for their leading asset. And I have time. and I could roll out of my other investments when the time is right and roll into this one and kind of plan my transitions smoothly and over a long period of time and create content for you guys. So this biotech investing, it's a philosophical challenge for myself. It's an analytical challenge for myself. It has synergistic benefits for me in making me more knowledgeable about my clinical research career and businesses. And it kind of helps me tie two things that are related, but don't necessarily operate in the same space with the same people together, and figure out what that why is for you, besides the obvious of generating wealth, because that's what we all want at the end of the day. There's always ancillary benefits as well. And if you don't have ancillary benefits, maybe you're going to get a good education that you couldn't get from Harvard, and hopefully it doesn't cost you as much. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, comment, share. I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye. Hey, if you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned for more videos.